Good afternoon. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real People, Real Stories, Raw. It is Sunday morning in the United States. It is actually about 1 o'clock in the East Coast, where my guest, Denise, is coming in from. Welcome to the show, Denise.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
It's my pleasure. Usually, my co host is with Debbie. And Debbie is obviously doing some self care this morning. She's taking care of herself. She may join us at some point during the show. If the universe says it's the right time, she'll be on with us. Otherwise, it's the two of us going solo today. And
Okay.
so I'm excited to have you on the show. Denise and I met through the community, through the Facebook community, in the past month, a month and a half or so ago through a friend that has actually been on one of my shows, a couple of my shows, David Strickle. And so I'm excited to hear your story, what you feel comfortable sharing. As guests in the community, friends of ours jump in on the show, whether it be live or on replay, I would like just to take a moment to acknowledge those that are with us live today. And thank you for joining both Denise and myself. And if you hear something that you like or love, with love, gently press your like or love button on your device. If you have any questions or comments or hear anything that resonates with you, please feel free to share it with both Denise and I. And either during the show or after the show, we will both take time to respond and reflect on your questions or comments. What I'd like to do is, well, first of all, Dharam Patel is joined us. He's coming in live from New Delhi, India. We are a global community here. And if you are coming in from another state outside of Massachusetts or Arizona, please let us know where you're coming in from and what country you're coming in from. So at some point, perhaps I can acknowledge it. I know we have David coming in from South Florida, the East Coast of South Florida. And so thank you for joining us live. What I'm going to do is also a watch party. So I'm going to start that. And it should be showing up on your page as well. Just give me one more moment here while I push it out there in a few other spots. And it should be showing up on your page as well. But in any event, Denise, welcome to the show this morning. It is already afternoon where you are. And I'd like to just ask, how was your morning leading up to you and I meeting in the studio this morning? How did your morning turn out for you?
My morning has been fabulous. I did all my self-care. I went to bed early last night. I got up early this morning and had a peaceful, lovely morning. Checked Facebook, got in touch with a few people, went on a nice little walk with my dog in the rain and worked out and meditated and have been thinking positive thoughts about this show today. Really, I'm excited. I'm going to talk about something I've never talked about before, but I totally trust the universe. I trust my guidance and I trust you. You and I have had some conversations, and I know that you are the one that has propelled me to decide that this story needs to come out.
Oh,
And
thank you so much.
I try. You have a trustworthy and a loving vibe, and I don't ordinarily trust a whole lot of men, but it's so funny. The last year or so, so many wonderful men have been coming into my life, teachers, friends, and it's a wonderful thing because coming from a misogynistic, woman-hating background, knowing that there are wonderful men in the world is very, very comforting. So, and you're one of them. So thank you.
Thank you. It means a lot to me to receive that comment. And for me, in the past, when I'd receive a compliment or a comment like that, I would receive it from very much from an ego perspective within myself, and it would just feed the ego. And it took a lot of work for me to get to the point where I can receive a common expression of gratitude from another human being, such as you just did. and receive it coming from the space of humility, and just pure gratitude. And it wasn't always that way, but part of growth, part of the healing of our mind, body, and soul is when we start to understand the power of our ego versus the power of who we are at our core, our soul, and be able to receive gratitude and appreciation from someone else and allowing us to just feel it in a moment. It's so much more rewarding and powerful to understand how we can impact and influence and inspire hope and change with other people. And so I thank you for that. It touched me very much. And uh, so I'm glad that you had a good morning. You did some self-care.
Oh yeah.
I also had a good morning. Although I did a hike and healing session this morning, an experience with a guest that wanted to do hiking. She came in from out of state, out of the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. She's here on, I believe, business, and we did a hike and healing session. It was early morning at sunrise along one of the mountain trails, and it was a great conversation. So I'm here. I'm balanced. I'm ready to be a part of sharing your story this morning. I do want to just preference that what I like to do is hopefully create a safe zone, a safe space for you to know that at any time, if I should ask you a question that you're uncomfortable with, you could set a loving boundary with me and just let me know that I'm just really not ready to answer that today, or I'm not comfortable. And I will respect you and love you for having the courage to set that boundary, and we'll just move forward and and know that no matter what we're having here, it's not a monologue but a dialogue. And so I invite you to start to share your story that you said you have not shared publicly before,
No.
and just allow yourself to just take moments to breathe and just be.
Okay. Thank you. I feel safe and I welcome questions, and I also am comfortable saying no if it's inappropriate for me. So that's all good. We're all good.
Okay.
I just want to preface my story by saying that I was born in 1956, and my one parent was an extreme misogynist, racist, homophobe, etc., etc. My other parent was much more open-minded. They were both rigid Catholics. So, needless to say, I grew up knowing that women were less. I grew up knowing that boys will be boys and that I had to put up with a certain amount of crap because that's just how they are. That's what I was taught. I no longer believe that. But I just want to give a little perspective about where I'm coming from. But I don't want to talk about my childhood so much right now as my last year in college. And that's when a major event took place that was debilitating at the time, but I have grown so much and I'm now grateful for that experience. I wouldn't be who I am today without it. That doesn't mean there isn't anything left to heal around it. I always will have something to heal from something. It doesn't end. Healing is a process, not a destination. So with that being said, I was around 19, 20, not feeling a lot of self-esteem and not feeling a lot of self-confidence. And I met this man who was absolutely charming and super handsome and exciting somehow. And we started to date. Well, it was only couple of weeks before I recognized that there was something really wrong with this man. And he started to scare me and say things that were scary and tried to control me, et cetera, et cetera. And it got to the point where I started having chest pains, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor said, are you under stress? Because your heart's fine. This is a stress reaction. And I said, well, I am having a problem with a boyfriend. And he said, well, you might want to dump that guy. So I went to this guy and said, I have to break up with you. And he said, no, you don't. And I said, no, I really do, because it's affecting my health. The doctor said that the stress that I'm under with you because of the fighting, because of your controlling, because of your trying to tell me what to do and breaking into my house in the middle of the night and all this stuff. This has got me for my health. If you love me, you will leave me alone. That's what I said to him. He left the room and came back with a razor blade and said, I will leave you, but I will be taking pieces of you with me when I go. He said, so make up your mind. Do you want to stay with me or do you want to break up with me? At that point, I thought, well, I think I just better stay alive for now and then figure something out. So I said, I'll stay with you. In my heart, I didn't mean that, but I knew that with a razor blade in a psychopath's hands, I wasn't safe. He had already shown signs of being crazy, driving crazy, getting into fights, threatening people. He was really frightening. He was a frightening person. And so I worked as a waitress and I would get home at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes he'd be in my bed waiting for me. This is after I tried to break up with him. And one night I locked all the doors and put a chair on under the door so he couldn't get in, and he broke everything. He broke everything. He broke the railing. He broke the door. And I'm hearing glass smashing, and he was trying to get in my room. So that was all bad enough. Then he started to. Then I said, I begged him to leave me alone. I didn't know what to do. He started stalking me. I would go out with friends. He'd show up, stare at me from the back of the room, followed behind me in his car when I was walking down the street, started threatening, telling me he was going to kill my friends because they were the problem. My friends were turning me against him. And it was crazy, insanity. I mean, it was absolute insanity. So needless to say, I was in terror. I lived in terror. It was absolutely terrifying. There was no place I could go to be safe. There was no safe spot. I was in North Adams, Massachusetts, which is Western Massachusetts, out it was a very fairly rural area. And there was one more time when he threatened me with severe bodily harm, and I won't go into the details on that because it was awful and graphic and awful, terrible, beyond anything that's worth speaking of. And I did call my mother, and she came and got me, and I went home for a few days. And then I went back, and the same stuff was happening, and I couldn't get rid of him. I told him at one point I was going to go to court, and he told me that I could do whatever I wanted because his father ran the mafia in the next town over, and that I would be the one that lost. And that if I didn't stop threatening him, breaking into my house and such activities would be the least of my problems. Then he started raping me, breaking into my house and raping me, or pulling me out of my car and raping me on the side of the road. I mean, it happened a number of times. And I'm just going to take a breath. I'm okay. I just need a breath. So I ended up getting thrown out of an apartment because the people were terrified of him. I had to find a place to live. And I could no longer study. I couldn't sleep. I was in mortal terror, for my life. And even though, he never hit me. He never hit me. He did push me a little bit. He pushed me and touched me inappropriately, most certainly, and used other types of violence. But he didn't actually punch me. And he would remind me of that. Have I ever beat you up? Well, no, but you've raped me. And he said, that's not rape. You're my girlfriend. I said, no, that's rape. And then he said, well, I'll show you what rape is, you know, and there was just no, he was a crazy man. There was no rationalizing. Even though I kept trying to be logical with him, it didn't land. Logic did not land with this man. He was out of his mind. So I met, at one point, he dragged me into his car and he said, we're going to go visit my family. And I found out from his family there was incest in his family and alcoholism and drug addiction. And he was like the sane one, you know, which was really scary. And I met his father, who he had built up to be this big monster. And yeah, it was very frightening. I couldn't wait to get out of there. So my life was not my own. I had no control over my life. I couldn't go to classes. I knew I had to quit school. I knew it was my senior year, last semester. I had to quit. And I was still taking dance classes, and at that time in the next town over from me, but it was his hometown. And my friend drove me to my dance class, and this man was riding the bumper like he wouldn't get off the bumper. And my friend said, well, what does he want? I said, well, whatever he wants, it's not good. Just don't let him in. Don't let him in. And if he takes me, if he grabs me and takes me away, call the cops. And he said, honey, what? Well, I can't. Well, what's he going to do? Kill me? I mean, if I would, he was afraid too. You know, he was afraid that if he did anything in my defense, that he would be hurt as well. And he said, and his father's in the mafia. And I said, oh boy. So all there was like fear and terror all around. I didn't have anyone that could protect me. And so that time I decided to get out of the car. I said, well, I'm not going to make him get a beat down. I'm going to get out and see what I can do. So I begged him. I said, please just let me go to my dance class. I'll talk to you after dance class. Just let me do my dance. You know how I love my dance. Please let me do my class. Leave me alone. Please leave me alone. And he says, well, that can't happen. So he grabbed me by the throat this time and dragged me into his car. And then he sped off. And I don't know what happened to the friend, but no cops ever came, and he kidnapped me. And all the way through the kidnapping, he was telling me not to, you know, if I tried to get out of the car, he was going to kill me. If I told anybody, he would kill them and me. And that he was going to prove to me how much he loved me by taking me away. And depending on only him, and he would be able to convince me to love him. And I said, at that point, I just had a notebook and I was writing things down, and I was trying to come up with an escape plan. But I would write notes, and when I went to the bathroom, I would write, I've been kidnapped, please, you know, this is the license plate, have this man arrested. And I dropped these little notes in different places, and sometimes he found a couple of them and threatened me and put his hand on my throat. And so we got all the way from northwestern Massachusetts to somewhere in Connecticut, and which is, I don't know how many miles, but you got to go through all of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and then you get to Connecticut. So it was 3 states. And we got to a toll booth, and he didn't have any money, and I didn't have any money. I was going to dance class. I didn't have any money on me. And so they made him pull over and said, you're going to have to go across the highway to this building over there and do something. I don't know what. Pay, given his information or whatever. So he looked at me and he said, you're not going anywhere, are you? And I said, where am I going to go? And I knew I just knew in my heart that was my opportunity to escape. So I played it up big. I said, where am I going to go? I don't know anybody. And I was sobbing and crying. I can't go. I don't know anybody. What am I going to do in the highway? Of course I'm going to be here. So, but I knew I wasn't going to be there when he got back. And he had to cross our part of the highway and then the other side of the highway. So it was a long walk. And as soon as he got over them to the other side, I jumped to the driver's side and took his car. And drove to and the nearest place I could find was a Howard Johnson's, and I ran in there screaming and shrieking, and the women took me down, they hid me, and eventually he showed up, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. It was so terrifying. And he was telling them to arrest me because I stole his car, and the state police wouldn't. Anyway, the state police came, and I said he needs to be arrested, and he said I need to be arrested, and the state police said, oh, this is a domestic dispute. I said, no, this is a kidnapping. And at that time there were no stalking laws. There were the women of, women were not taken seriously, and they just minimized it with me. They said, are you all right? I said, well, what do you mean by all right? Well, do you have any cuts on you? Do you have any bruises on you? And I said, well, not this time. I have before. I said, I don't know. Look at my neck. He grabbed my neck. Maybe I have a bruise on my neck. And they're like, we can't find any bruises. Well, you look all right. I don't know. What do you want to do? Anyway, I ended up being given the car and permission to drive the car back, and he had to call his father to get picked up. From that point on, I no longer had a full night's sleep for a long time, years. I was in PTSD, big, full-fledged. I couldn't walk at night because I felt like there was someone behind me all the time. I slept when I was in my bed trying to sleep. I had a phone and a knife and a boot in my bed in case anyone came in. I could throw something or stab them. I would shake. I would just literally lay there and shake, and I hardly got any sleep at all. And I finally found a therapist, and this was the kindest man I'd ever met until this point. He was so kind, and he gave me his phone number, and he said, when you have an attack, my PTSD flares, he called them attacks. When you have an attack, you can call me. So sometimes I would call him at 10 o'clock at night or 9 o'clock at night, and he would talk me down a little bit, and I would not feel so alone. The next relationship I got in was with another scary man, but he wasn't as scary. And I went through. You want to ask a question? Please do.
Yeah, I actually was gonna just invite you just to take a moment and just pause, take a nice deep breath. Um, I I want to just take a moment to thank you and honor you for having the courage to step forward in this moment to share this part of your backstory in your life. Because my understanding is that this is the first time that you're sharing this truth that you went through, this experience. And as I have listened to you, it really hit hard. It's a very painful experience that anyone should ever have to endure in their life. And if you are in our community and if you're watching this, and if your only experience with hearing a story like this is just through a movie or a TV show or a book you've read, this is the real deal. This stuff does happen. Mm-hmm. And it is someone's reality, and it was your reality, and it was your experience. And if you are also a guest and you have had a similar experience, to understand that you are not alone today. There are other women and men, perhaps, that have endured this level of abuse and this experience that ripped you to your core, that had impacted your soul, your being. And so I honor you, and I'm so grateful that you had the courage to step forward today and share this experience and this relationship. My understanding was 3 months.
Approximately 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
I don't know exactly, but it was in that time frame.
And just listening to you intently share every part of it, it felt like 3 years.
Oh,
I
it
felt like
did.
I just was sitting here for 3 years listening to you share. And so I could only imagine that 3 months for you may have felt like 30 years.
It felt interminable. It did, because there was no hope. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. Through,
Yeah.
I didn't see how it was going to end, or if it did end, it was going to end badly. It was one of the most hopeless and powerless. Like I had no power. I felt as though I had no say over my body, no say over my life, no say over any decisions that I couldn't do anything. I felt completely controlled. I might as well have been in a cult or chained to a basement, because I that's how limited my life was and how frightening.
How were you able to break free of him? Obviously I heard the story. I heard what you shared, but what prevented him? How were you able to protect yourself above and beyond? Uh, how were you able to finally detach from him, detach and disconnect?
Well, it did end up going to court. First of all, I just want to say it did end up going to court. It was a kangaroo court. I had some kind of victim advocate with me who was powerless too. His father got marched through the courtroom and talked to the judge and told the judge that I was a whore and I was taking advantage of his son, who was younger. He was like 9 months younger than me, or maybe a year younger than me. And he, in front of the whole court, he tried to shame me. And I obviously had no power, but something, and they wouldn't let me charge him with kidnapping. They said that it was a domestic dispute. The most they could let me charge him with was assault, because he grabbed me around the neck and dragged me in the car. So, once again, I got slammed by the courts. But what did come of that? They had had enough. The police and the courts had enough experience with this guy to know that he was trouble, and they came up with an agreement. They said if he leaves you alone for the next year or 2 years or something, some period of time, if he completely leaves you alone, no phone calls, no showing up at your house, no nothing, for 1 year, and goes into the Marines, would you agree to file the charges? And I thought, a year without him, that sounded like heaven. That sounded like heaven. That was beautiful. A year
Yeah.
without this man in my life. That sounded great. And I felt like the best I could do. So I did get a court order. There was a court order for him to stay away from me for a year. In that year, he showed up at my parents' house to apologize. My parents were not happy. But he really did just apologize and left. And then I started getting rotten, nasty things in the mail that I won't even mention, that I know came from him. So he didn't quite leave me alone, but I've never seen him again, and he's never called me, he's never showed up, so he's out. Now, how did I heal from that? Like I started to say earlier, I did have a therapist who was a very kind man, and he let me call him any time of the day or night, which I think is really going above and beyond the call of duty for a therapist. They don't do that now. And so I was able to get through in days knowing that I could call him or see him. But I still didn't want to go out of the house. I developed a highway phobia. I developed agoraphobia. In between, I had met the man that became the father of my children. I ended up having my first child within a year or two after this happened. And that created a whole set of issues with him. He was pretty scary too, in some ways. Scary to me. He wasn't really scary like that man, but in other ways. Anyway, it didn't do any good for that relationship. I was pretty convinced that this guy was going to kill me too. You can't really have a relationship when you think someone's going to kill you. So that relationship never had a chance, because I was so destroyed emotionally. And so then I went back. I stayed out of work for about a year, and then I went back to work and started therapy, and went through a whole bunch of therapists that didn't help. They diagnosed me with all kinds of stuff and tried to give me meds and the whole psychiatric thing. That didn't work. So I just suffered, and eventually some of it went away. Some of the panic went away on its own, but I still have occasional panic attacks. I still have occasional anxiety attacks. Can I say definitively it was from that experience? No, but I never had a panic attack before I met him. I'd had some anxiety, certainly, but that's where the panic started. Anyway, fast forward, I somehow survived. Finished my degree, my bachelor's degree, and I had already been introduced to metaphysics and meditation and a few self-healing things, and I love to exercise and dance. So little by little, I just tried to do what I could do to make myself be okay with my being in my skin, and I got through. I just muddied my way through, but it wasn't pretty and it wasn't fun, and I didn't sleep well. Life was very, very, very difficult for about 10 years. What ended up happening in that 10 years was I became a cocaine addict. And well, it didn't even take, it was less than 10 years, because the man that was the father of my child and I ended up doing a lot of cocaine, and there was a lot of cocaine around, and I ended up a crackhead. And I know it was my attempt at self-medication and my attempt at escaping my horror, the horror that was inside my heart. And thank God for that cocaine addiction, because it got me into a program, a 12-step program that began my a spiritual journey for me. And that it wasn't an instant cure, but I started to see some light. I started to see some hope. I saw people that had been through stuff and had gone through it and are well now, doing well on the other side. And I thought, well, maybe if they can do it, I can do it. So kudos to the 12 steps. They gave me hope. And my sponsor, I talked to her several years later. I got a sponsor right away, and I said, I asked her to be my sponsor. And years later, I said, remember when I asked you to be my sponsor? And she said, yeah, I was scared. I said to my husband, that crazy lady asked me to be her sponsor. So I wasn't well early in recovery, believe me. It was at 5 years in recovery, I picked up cutting. It was a long, hard journey. And finally, I'm going to say at somewhere around 10 years sober, my spirituality started to come back because of the 12 steps. And I started getting back into my crystals and my tarot cards and those things that I had dabbled in earlier, but had to let go of because I had kids to support and too much to do, meetings to go to. I ended up picking back up my spiritual tools. And then I started meeting here and there some friends that also were on a spiritual journey. And then I started meeting some healers that were on a spiritual journey. And it was a gradual, like, stepping back into my soul. It didn't happen overnight, but little by little, I met a Reiki practitioner who wanted people to practice on. And I met all these different modalities. I met a drummer, a shamanic drummer. I got some sound healing. Still going to 12-step meetings and still having a therapist, still doing psychotherapy without meds at this point. I wasn't on any meds at this point. And just God, the universe, universal life force started entering my system. And I started to feel a little bit better. Little parts of me were healing, but there were a whole bunch of parts, and they couldn't all be healed. They weren't all healed at once, but little parts were healing. And I started to feel like someday maybe I will be a normal person. I won't be that crazy person that walked into the halls, early on. So this was
Can I just interject real quick?
Yeah, I'll go on and on. You need to interject.
No, you're doing beautifully. I just curious, the last few words that you said, referring to yourself as that wanting to become that normal person rather than that crazy person. I just, for me, who are we to judge what's normal and what's crazy? And to me, those are just labels that really don't serve us at all. It wasn't that there is no such thing as normal in my world today, and there is no such thing as crazy. But there is such a thing as having a wounded soul, having been traumatized, having gone through extreme trauma, as you did, having trying to just wanting to feel better and not knowing how to seek it, how to get it, how to find it, and how to feel it. And so therein lies, for me, it's really not about are we normal, are we crazy, are we there yet,
Right.
have we regressed? It's just about healing our mind, our body, and our soul. It just, for me, I just need to share that, put that out there, because if there's someone listening to us and they're trying to measure up where they are in the spectrum of how they're feeling, we don't have to feel normal. We don't have to feel like we're less than. We don't have to feel like we've lost our mind. We can just accept that we have wounds that go deep. And with the courage like you are sharing and you have gone through, we get to do the healing work. And through the healing work, we get to do one thing: come home to ourselves, to our soul. And so thank you for allowing me to share that with you.
I would like to also, I absolutely concur with what you just said, but those were the words and the feelings that I was using at that time. I really felt completely damaged. I felt completely different than other people. That was how I felt. That was my perception at that time.
I know
and
that.
That's since changed. I don't feel crazy. I'm not crazy. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So I continued on my journey. I tried Al-Anon. I couldn't stick to it at the first few times. I am a member of Al-Anon now. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say that. Oh shit. Oh well.
You know what?
They're gonna have to find me.
Denise.
Yes.
I give you permission to say that, and I'll tell you why. I don't agree that we need to keep secrets today. And if there's someone that wants to learn more about what that 12-step program is, are you acknowledging that you are a member of that 12-step program? And if it has helped you do some healing and given you some answers, you're not promoting it. You're just sharing that it's something that has helped you. And therein lies, that's part of your story. That's part of your truth. And it's an opportunity for someone to say, well, what is Al-Anon? And perhaps they reach out to you, or they reach out to me, because I also did some 12-step recovery work in Al-Anon, and it actually saved my life. Yes. So we don't need to keep that a secret. We could tell our truth and feel good about it.
Well, it's not a secret as far as I'm concerned. I just know that they have traditions that say state anonymity, blah blah blah. So. Anyway,
well, you're not outing anybody. You're just acknowledging that it's a program that's helped you.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
It has helped me. So what ended up happening was, over time, I finally found my first metaphysical teacher, and I was around 29, 30 years old, 31 years old, I don't know. And she was a trance channel and a palm reader and astrologer. She just did a little bit of everything. She did a lot of everything. She was really, really gifted. I studied with her for 8 years, and I started to develop my own spiritual skills and my own spiritual style. And she taught us how to meditate and how to do mediumship and all kinds of fun stuff. And I loved it, all kinds of new age stuff. And I really started to sense that there was a grand plan, and that there was a grand sense of love in this universe that I could find, and that I could embody, that I could walk with through this plant, through this life. Does that mean all my problems were gone at that point? Not at all. It just opened my eyes to the fact that there was a whole universe of love out there, and all these ways that I could connect with love to beings, to energies, to angels, etc., etc. So that was a lovely experience. I still wasn't all that functional at times. I still had very serious depressions at times, and I had relationship issues, and life was still difficult. And I just kept moving on. I just kept moving forward and doing the best I could. And over time, I started to enhance my skills. So I started to really believe, I'm going to say 10 years ago, started going to this metaphysical church, and they were teaching me all the new thought stuff, all the new thought, change your thought, change your life. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, Ernest Holmes, but it was Mary Baker Eddy. She was one of the original founders of the New Thought movement. And I started to learn about how if I change my language and I change my perspective and I remember that I'm a perfect child of God first, instead of having the illness or the disturbance in the forefront, remember the first thing, I'm a child of the universe, and I am a loving child and I'm a beloved child of the universe, and I have love to share. And that changed me so much, just a couple of years with that philosophy, and people teaching me how to change how I think and how I speak. And I let go of so much in that time. In that same time, I was introduced to EFT. Now, I'm going to get back to the original story that I told at this point, because at this point I'm a little healed now. I'm moving along. I'm moving along pretty well in my healing process. May have made some big strides. Still had more to go, of course, still do. However, I met this guy who does EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, the tapping. And I had gotten a bunch of work done with him, and he was fabulous. He had helped me with some other stuff. And I called him one day and I said, you know what? I think I need some help. And he said, what's the problem? I said, I'm still searching for that guy that kidnapped me. And this is 25 years later. I want to find him and I want to stab him. So I would go through phone books, and I would, back in the day, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, when there were still phone books, I would call information. I would reach out to anyone with the same last name and say, do you know a guy named such and such? And, I was obsessed. There was a part of me that would just get completely focused on trying to find him. And the ultimate goal was to stab him. Now, here I am. I'm a card reader. I'm a meditation teacher at this point. I'm, doing all these spiritual things. And that's what, it was no longer coherent for me to want to stab someone. It didn't make any sense anymore. And it hurt me. It didn't feel good. I didn't like harboring that in my heart. It no longer felt like me, but I couldn't stop. It was a mental obsession. So I finally told a my EFT teacher about it. Well, practitioner who became my teacher. And he said, yeah, we could work on that. Well, 2.5 hours of the most intense EFT I've ever had in my life. And somehow the emotional connection through the EFT got severed. So I could think about the situation and not want to stab him anymore. The stabbing thing gone. I couldn't even muster up any more tears. I couldn't muster up any more fear. It was gone. I'd already done a lot of work, though, in therapy and in the steps and whatnot. I'd done a lot of work. It wasn't like I hadn't done anything. But boy, it didn't sit right being a spiritual person wanting to stab someone. So I was amazed in one session. So what did I do? I went out and got certified. He certified me as an EFT instructor, because how beautiful it is. And my specialty with EFT is trauma. I do fabulous. I hate to brag. No, I don't hate to brag. I take that back. I'm not bragging. The truth is I'm a specialist with trauma now. Not only with EFT, but with whatever it is, Reiki, whatever, talking, changing thought, all these different techniques that I use. I have people that have been traumatized in ways similar to me, and I'm able to help them. And I have people that have come from cults, and I've helped them deprogram. I've done some very serious, intensive work with people. And you know what? Now I'm grateful for that man. That man gave me a gift. I'm grateful that he gave me the gift, whatever it was that he gave me, that made me look deeply and go deeply and search deeply and continue to work, because I wanted wholeness. I wanted wellness. I wanted peace. And I wasn't going to stop until I got it. And I'm not sure I would have worked that hard if my ass wasn't on fire. And my ass was on fire, I have to tell you. It was desperate. I was desperate to get better. So today, he's one of my teachers, not one of my favorite teachers. He was a severe taskmaster, not a good teacher, but I learned something that I needed to learn. So I bless him. I don't thank him for hurting me, but I bless him for teaching me. I don't.
You're talking about your perpetrator when you were a senior in
Yes.
college? Okay.
Mhm.
Just to clarify that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love I love your acknowledgement of what you just said. That's today the coaching work I did early this morning along the mountain trail was on forgiveness. And what we
Mhm.
touched on, and I've shared this before, when it comes to forgiveness, it's about really looking inward and asking yourself, what is the lesson that I needed to learn from this experience, whatever it was?
Right.
And through the lesson, once we can identify what we needed to learn, we can go to gratitude, because once we learn a lesson, we don't have to repeat. We don't have to
Amen.
repeat it again, right?
Amen. I started to be able to recognize narcissistic, psychopathic type people pretty young in my life because of him. And I started to learn how to run the other way. I recognize sometimes you learn what you don't want before you learn what you do want. And I learned a lot about what I don't want from him. You know,
And we continue to learn. We don't learn when life is smooth. We don't learn when we're celebrating the victories. And a lot of that time when we're celebrating, if we're not always coming from humility, we're coming from ego. We get to humility when we hit a bottom of some sort, when we're in pain, when we're wounded. That's when our growth opportunities come. That's where the greatest gifts in life come from, is when we make the choice to walk through it instead of living in it, because that's a choice too. You could have chose to live in your pain for the rest of your life, but instead you chose to not live in it, but feel it. And through feeling it, you've been able to heal it. And that is the most important gift that you not only gave to yourself, you gave to your children, you continue to give to others, and how you pay it forward in the work you do today.
yes.
Yeah.
And the work that I do today is so informed by all my experience. And when I'm sitting across the table from someone, I see a piece of myself in everyone. I wish I could say that was the only trauma in my life, and I wish I could say that he was the only man that ever gave me trouble, or the only time I was ever attacked, or the only time I was ever disrespected. Unfortunately, that's not true. There's a whole bunch of other stories. So from healing all of those, including that one, and getting to the other side and figuring out what works for me, I'm now able to sit down. I have certificates on my wall. I've studied all. I'm a metaphysical minister, and I'm an EFT specialist, and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, I have a bunch of skills if anyone wants to look me up. And it's because of all the pain that I've been through that I did that. And it's because I survived because I learned that stuff. It's the stuff that worked in my life. So of course I want to give it to other people. I want to give what I've learned to other people. And it all works together. I did have I got my bachelor's degree, despite I did go back in the following year and finish up and get my bachelor's degree. I wasn't going to let him rob me of that. And since then, I've taken all kinds of courses of study, and learned all different things. And it's wonderful. I'm a 62-year-old woman with a lot of knowledge now and a lot of wisdom because of all that I've walked through. And I'm very grateful today. And I'm really happy and peaceful. This is the most peaceful I've ever been in my life. And I am far from perfect. I could write you a list right now of all the things I still have to work, that I still want to work on. I choose to work on. I choose to face. I choose to feel. I choose to heal from. But I know it never ends. You said that earlier. It doesn't. Growth. The day I stop growing is the day I leave the body. That's how it is. I'm not going to stop growing until I leave the body. I'm optimistic today. I'm hopeful, and I love my work. I'm a master life coach, as well as a Reiki practitioner and an EFT practitioner. And in my life coaching, and I'm an intuitive. I'm very, very intuitive, and I channel, and I do. And with my clients, I have this bag of skills. So whatever works for any given client at any given time is what I pull out of my tool bag, and we work with it. So I have and nothing brings me more joy than to help somebody else now, because it's not out of ego. It's out of absolute gratitude for the fact that I am as healed as I am today. And I
Beautiful.
so want to share it with other people. That's my work is joyous. It's joyous. Even when people are suffering, I'm like, oh, it's okay for you to be suffering right now because you're going to be okay. I feel it in my heart for them. I know they're going to be okay. They don't know it, but I do. So I don't sit there and cry too much. I say, I know you feel that way. I hear it and I know it, but I also know you've got strength inside of you that you don't know yet. And I'm going to help bring that out. I'm going to help you find it.
Beautiful. I'd like to, believe it or not, you don't know this, you may be feeling it, but we're at 10:54 or 1:54. We're coming up on the hour, and out of respect for your time and Spirituality Gone Wild channel, which has I think a new show that's coming on shortly after the hour. What I'd like to do is invite you to maybe give some closing thoughts as it relates to your own healing journey. But before you go there, I do have one last question. If you could maybe give a brief response, is where are you at personally today as far as being, let's say, connected to yourself, to your soul? And how has your experience and where you're at in your healing journey impacted relationships outside of yourself?
Wow, that's a big question. Relationships have not been an easy part of my life. I have only recently, within the past year, cleared. I've been a single woman for 8 or 10 years now, by choice, not by necessity, because I didn't like men. I didn't think I wanted to have anything to do with them, and this isn't really for real. Anyway, I did a bunch of healing this year. So now I'm looking forward to having an intimate relationship. I've met someone and we haven't gotten intimate, but I think it might turn that way, and I'm open. In terms of friendships, people that vibrate somewhere near where I vibrate and I get along really well. Sometimes friends come and go because we somehow find ourselves vibrating differently. Relationships are not always easy, and that's why I'm in Al-Anon. Right now I'm in the process of learning about relationships in Al-Anon. That's an area of growth for me, and I'm grateful for that. And what was the other part of the question? You asked me about relationships and how I'm feeling about myself.
Really, where are you in as far as your healing of your soul, your mind, your body? Where do you feel you're at? We know we're never done, as you've said so eloquently. When we're done, we're dead. I believe that. When we think we're enlightened, it just means we have way more work to do, and that statement's coming from ego. And so I'd like for you to just take a moment here. Where are you? But I think you've kind of answered that question. It's a process, it's a journey, and it's ongoing.
I want to say that last year I did David Strickle's boot camp this past fall, and I did a lot of healing there. And I'm not trying to promote his program because it's not for everybody. It's for whoever is called to do it. But in any case, I did a whole bunch of work, and I am the freest I've ever been in my life today. My soul and my mind, my body, and my feet and my heart are pretty much aligned most of the time. And I notice when they're not, and I can get myself back to center. That's the best it gets. Noticing and being aware when I'm a little out of line in some part of my being and saying, whoa, your emotions are over here and your feet are over there. So what do we have to do to bring those together? Or my heart's over here and my emotions are over here. What do we have to do to get
balance?
Get balance and get centered. And I have things that I can do to achieve that.
Yeah.
So life is grand. Life is wonderful. My soul feels good. And I'm happy most of the time now. There is life after trauma. There's a lot of hope, and there's beauty and joy and all kinds of good things after trauma.
Denise, I would like to ask you with the minute that we have left or so, could you share in this moment, having spent an hour on the show now and having shared a story that you had never shared publicly before, how are you feeling right now in this moment, right here, right now?
I feel freer. I feel more authentic because this is something that I haven't been comfortable talking about, and I've given people bits and pieces, but never the whole story, and never the continuation of events. I feel great. I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. This is what I thought I thought I might be. This is why I never shared it before. I thought you made mistakes in that relationship, and some of it was your fault. I no longer feel that way. I feel like it happened because it was supposed to happen, and blame is foolishness. There's no blame. Yeah, he did bad things. I made some errors in judgment. It was, so moving on from shame, I've moved on from blame. I've moved on from self-hatred, from self-criticism. So I'm freer today because I just did this. I am free.
Beautiful.
You have given me the opportunity to let go of the rest of the shame that might be still lurking somewhere. Thank you. Beautiful experience.
Thank you. With that, thank you so much for joining us today. Right now, my body is, I'm levitating. I'm in total gratitude. I'm glad that I was able to create a safe space, a platform where you could come forward and help you on your healing process in this moment. I'd like to ask if you could stay in the studio once we go off live, just for maybe just a few moments, just to do a quick wrap up.
Sure.
And with that, thank you for joining us on Real People, Real Stories, Raw. We'll catch you next time. Have a beautiful balance of your day. And take some time to do some self-care. No matter what's going on in your life, what I learned is self-care was the gateway for self-like, which eventually led to falling in love with myself. So take some time for yourself today, no matter what you got going on. There is nothing more important than you. It's not coming from a space of selfishness. It's coming from a space of love. Just take time for yourself and do something that helps fuel your soul and makes you feel good. So we'll catch you next time on Real People, Real Stories Raw. Thank you.